Hey guys, I'm Tony. Welcome to Uncle Tony's Story Time. In 1985, an American warship was searching for something in the North Atlantic. Professor Robert Ballard, as the commander, was staring intently at the screen. The underwater robot was moving steadily forward, and when they clearly saw the boiler on the seabed, everyone on the ship shouted excitedly, "We've found it!" Unexpectedly, these were the remains of the Titanic, which sank to the ocean floor in 1912 and had disappeared for 73 years. The Titanic, perhaps the world's most well-known ship, is familiar to residents of any country who are well-versed in its story. But do we really understand this story deeply? Tales like the ship sinking into the icy sea, Jack and Rose, which we are familiar with, may only be the tip of the iceberg of the entire story. Why do some believe that the Titanic never sank? Why was there a mysterious ship witnessing this tragedy silently 37 kilometers away when the Titanic sank? Moreover, why do some describe the sinking of the Titanic as a series of cursed events? Furthermore, was the story of Jack and Rose not purely fabricated? Additionally, why did the Titanic ultimately meet its fate of sinking? Today, let us delve into these 5 startling matters. Rewinding to 1995, researcher Robin Gardner from Oxford, UK, proclaimed that the Titanic had never succumbed to a sinking fate. This statement sent shockwaves around the world. If the Titanic had not sunk, what exactly were the remains found at the bottom of the North Atlantic by experts? And if the Titanic hadn't sunk, where would the over 1,500 passengers on board be? Robin Gardner, with his latest publication in hand, calmly laid out a shocking theory. He mentioned the need to clarify that, at the time, there were 2 shipping companies named White Star Line and Cunard Line, both British subsidiaries. In the 1900s, the shipping industry competition reached its peak. The White Star Line decided to join the American IMM group, thus receiving financial backing. In contrast, Cunard Line focused its efforts on product development. In 1906, Cunard Line successfully built the fastest and largest ocean liners on the North Atlantic at the time, the Lusitania and the Mauretania. In this commercial rivalry, White Star Line faced defeat. To address this challenge, White Star Line devised a strategy to build the largest ships. They planned to construct 3 top-tier ocean liners that would surpass Cunard Line's in speed, size, and luxury, named the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. These 3 ships shared the same design blueprint. Taking the Titanic as an example, the ship featured 11 decks, a total length of 269 meters, a width of 28.3 meters, and a height of 53.3 meters. During that period, newspapers displayed detailed cross-sectional diagrams of the Titanic, which appeared almost like a city at sea when compared to other liners. The Titanic's interior fittings and decoration style were comparable to a 5-star hotel, equipped with crystal chandeliers, stained glass, finely carved furniture, and 2 giant revolving staircases in first class. The ship also boasted a temperature-controlled swimming pool, a Turkish-style bath, an electric bath, a gymnasium, a squash court, 4 dining rooms, 2 barber shops, 2 beauty salons, and even a library. Crucially, the ship had a very high safety level. It was designed with 15 watertight compartments, ensuring that even if one compartment was breached, it would not affect navigation. The power supply would remain unaffected even if water entered 3 compartments. And even if 4 compartments were flooded, the giant vessel could still float on the surface, awaiting rescue. Therefore, the launch of White Star Line's shipbuilding project immediately garnered intense attention from all societal sectors. Within the shipyards of Northern Ireland, construction began on a vast ocean liner. By 1910, the first completed Olympic was launched, and the second, Titanic, also entered its final stages of fitting. At this point, researcher Robert Gardner presented a photograph. Two identical colossal ships docked at the harbor. Can you tell me which ship is the Titanic? It's genuinely challenging to distinguish. Gardner then added that he had discovered a historical account from a Titanic survivor. Lawrence Beasley, a second-class passenger, mentioned in his memoir that the Titanic was remarkably stable during its voyage. Looking out from the right side of the ship, you could only see the ocean, but from the left, you saw the sky, with no sight of the sea at all. What does this specifically imply? Following this, Robert Gardner showcased 46 rivet samples, all salvaged from the wreckage of the Titanic underwater. According to regulations, ships were supposed to use number 4 steel nails, but why were there numerous number 3 steel nails? Surprisingly, the ship also contained a significant amount of iron nails. Upon closer examination, why did these iron nails exhibit a honeycomb-like glass structure in their microstructure? Gardner suggested that the Titanic might have had inherent flaws in its quality. Not only were there acts of cutting corners during the construction of the Titanic, but the ship's keel structure also had its inherent issues. As survivors described, the differing views from either side of the ship's windows could likely be due to the tilt of the ship's body, which in turn might relate to the imbalance in its keel structure. However, with White Star Line being a well-funded company with numerous designers at the time, why were there still issues of cutting corners in the construction of the Titanic, even leading to structural quality defects? Only Robert Gardner delved further into the analysis of the cause, pointing out that the problem primarily lay with a first-class passenger. This passenger, who suddenly interrupted his journey the day before the ship was set to sail, was J.P. Morgan, the founder of what is now J.P. Morgan Chase, and a magnate in the financial world. At that time, he was the founder of the IMM Group, the parent company of White Star Line. On the eve of the Titanic's maiden voyage, he decided to cancel his trip. Perhaps he had foreseen the ship's doomed fate. Robert Gardner further explored the context of that era, suggesting that the root of the problem was not the Titanic, but the first large vessel, the Olympic. At that time, White Star Line was filled with ambition. In May 1911, the Olympic officially commenced its service. However, the new journey was not smooth. During its third voyage, it unfortunately collided with a tugboat at the port of New York, causing damage to the ship's hull, forcing it to return to the UK empty for repairs. Most concerning was, the Olympic had to bear all responsibility, with the insurance company refusing compensation. After a month, the Olympic was finally repaired and set sail towards the US with great fanfare once more. Despite only a few safe voyages, on its fifth journey, shortly after departing from the British dock, it collided with a British warship. This collision was severe, completely destroying the warship's bow. The Olympic's hull also suffered a significant impact. This time, they had to return to the dockyard for further repairs. Due to the Olympic's full liability, the insurance company still refused to pay. The construction cost of the Olympic at the time was $7 million, approximately $370 million today. It was estimated that to recoup the investment, it needed to complete 100 round trips. However, not even 4 round trips had been completed yet, and the dockyard had already undergone 2 major refurbishments. Incredibly, the dock also housed the Titanic, planned to cost even more at $7.5 million. The rate of expenditure was even faster than running water. Unable to set sail, the Olympic caused White Star Line to receive no cash flow. Therefore, researcher Robert Gardner began to suspect that by 1912, White Star Line might have faced an unavoidable risk of bankruptcy. What to do? It's highly probable that J.P. Morgan, the man who never boarded, had designed a brilliant plan behind the scenes for White Star Line to resurrect from the dead. How cunning and ruthless was this strategy? Here, Robin Gardner reiterated multiple times, "It's merely speculation, purely speculation." But in fact, Robin's conjecture was not entirely unfounded. Before the Titanic's voyage, it docked alongside the Olympic in the shipyard. They stayed there for a full 44 days, leaving behind some photographs. So, did you guess J.P. Morgan's brilliant strategy? During these 44 days, they swapped the Titanic with the damaged Olympic, making the damaged Olympic masquerade as the Titanic. The fate of the Titanic was sealed. It had to sink to the depths of the North Atlantic, down to more than 3,800 meters. Morgan planned to use this to deceive the insurance company, aiming to compensate for his financial losses. Regarding the more than 2,000 passengers on board, J.P. Morgan had his unique strategy. The Californian, dispatched by White Star Line, was to follow closely behind, ready for rescue. Perhaps only in this way could we truly convince the captain and the foreman responsible for the sinking mission. Otherwise, it would be too cruel. No one would agree to his request. Subsequently, the Californian's cargo manifest also indirectly verified this hypothesis. Among its cargo, besides a large quantity of cotton, it was unexpectedly prepared with over 3,500 blankets, resembling a rescue ship. As for the story's conclusion, it's well known. During the Titanic sinking incident, the Californian was stationed just 37 kilometers away, watching the Titanic sink without even responding to the wireless distress signals. The captain even chose to ignore the distress flares. The deeper conspiracy hidden behind this, I dare not speculate. However, all these logical assumptions here find ample explanation. Why was the Titanic built with shortcuts? Why did its keel appear uneven? It was actually a switch with the Olympic, a vessel already damaged and knowingly used for insurance fraud. Moreover, why didn't the Californian take rescue action? While researcher Robin Gardner didn't provide a clear explanation, it indeed compels one to speculate who the victims were in the shipwreck. In that era, the world's wealthiest, Astor IV, the spouse of major department store mogul Isidor Straus, banker B. Guggenheim, and many prominent figures from British and American society were seen as J.P. Morgan's potential competitors. The Titanic disaster led to the unfortunate demise of these competitors. In the following year, J.P. Morgan, along with Rothschild, took the lead in founding the Federal Reserve and successfully seized control over the issuance of the U.S. dollar and its economy. Therefore, does Robin's shocking perspective on the shipwreck truly have concrete evidence to defend it? Indeed, the Olympic had an internal number of 400, while the Titanic was assigned 401. To this day, a significant number of artifacts bearing the number 400 circulate in the market, initially removed from the Olympic. However, among all the wreckage of the Titanic retrieved from the ocean floor, number 401 has never been found. Why might this be? It's highly plausible that the Titanic's decorative materials were not actually marked with 401 due to rushed work and the intent to commit insurance fraud at that time. Essentially, the passengers were aboard the Olympic, which had its number erased. Moreover, Robin Gardner displayed comparative photos between the Titanic and the Olympic in his book. The top photo, taken during the Titanic's construction, shows 14 neatly arranged portholes at the bow. Another photo, taken at the time of the Titanic's voyage, reveals a reduction to 16 portholes appearing irregular. Indeed, the 16 irregular portholes precisely match the Olympic's unique design feature. Despite Robin Gardner's speculation sparking widespread social attention and debate immediately after being made public in 1995, even Gardner himself pointed out, at the end of his book, that there exists compelling evidence to refute his hypothesis. In the images captured at the ocean floor, the ship's propeller is marked with number 401. This wreckage definitely belongs to the Titanic. However, doubts have never ceased. Subsequently, a researcher named Andrew Newton produced a documentary that, in its final part, provided even more shocking evidence. Underwater robots recorded the letters M and P clearly inscribed on the wreckage, evidently pointing to the Olympic. Regrettably, experts of the underwater wreck site have never considered salvage operations. Furthermore, given the bacterial damage to these remains, experts predict that by 2037 they might completely disintegrate. Hence, while Robin Gardner's hypothesis is generally dismissed by the mainstream industry, it's destined to become an eternal unsolved mystery. The Titanic was only 37 kilometers away from the Californian at the time of its sinking. Why not immediately proceed with the rescue operation? Aside from Gardner's perspective, according to mainstream research logic, the story might go like this. Rewinding to April 12, 1912, the second day of the Titanic's voyage, it received its first iceberg warning. At that time, there was a wireless telegraph room on board belonging to Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company, which had only officially started operating in 1910. Thus, this telegraph room held a high status and was not directly under the captain's command. In fact, it functioned like a branch of Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company on the Titanic, with even the captain being its client. The telegraph room was staffed by two operators named J.G. Phillips and H.S. Bride. To win bonuses, these men not only assisted the captain with telegraph operations, but also handled all sorts of telegrams for the passengers. Due to their heavy workload, they were required to work around the clock, and their beds were placed inside the telegraph room. Typically, they would start working as soon as they woke up. On April 12th, the captain received warnings about icebergs. Predicting that the icebergs might drift further south than usual that year, he adjusted the Titanic's course southward twice to avoid them. Despite this, the captain did not slow down and continued towards the United States at a speed of 21.5 knots. Just 2 days later, on April 14th, the telegraph room received 7 more iceberg warnings from nearby ships. Logically, the captain should have continued to veer south and definitely reduced the ship's speed under such circumstances. However, it turned out that the captain chose to ignore these iceberg warnings, continuing to head towards the United States without hesitation. How could this happen? In Robin Gardner's speculative theory, the captain intentionally planned to scuttle the ship. During the subsequent inquiry into the accident, a key survivor provided crucial testimony. His name was J.B. Bruce Ismay, then the chairman of the White Star Line. This scenario is also depicted in the movie Titanic. There were rumors that Ismay told the captain, "This is the Titanic's maiden voyage. We are pursuing speed. We must break the Cunard Line's transatlantic speed record so that the White Star Line can surpass Cunard Line in luxury, comfort, and speed." Do you remember the financial difficulties the White Star Line was facing now? The Olympic's first voyage didn't go smoothly. If the second ship, the Titanic, couldn't directly beat the Cunard Line, the further development of the White Star Line might face significant difficulties. Therefore, the captain decided to take J.B. Bruce Ismay's advice and chose a strategy that was both unsafe and accelerated. Worse still, the publicity at the time misled everyone into wrongly believing that the Titanic was a ship that could never sink. Thus came the night of April 14th. On that day, visibility was severely limited. and although the ship was equipped with a lookout tower, the crew inside could see nothing. Meanwhile, in the telegraph room, warnings of icebergs were being continuously sent. Exhausted, the two telegraph operators repeatedly issued iceberg warnings to the captain, who seemed to disregard these alerts. They became somewhat impatient, as the peak hours of the evening were also when passengers were sending and receiving a high volume of telegrams. They felt that other ships should cease issuing similar iceberg warnings. They needed to focus on sending telegrams for passengers to earn bonuses, as handling these warnings was both time-consuming and unprofitable. Telegraph operator J.G. Phillips angrily responded to the California in a telegram, "Keep out! We are busy with press matters." When the California received this message at 10:55 p.m., its operator was so infuriated that he decided to shut down the telegraph machine and go to bed. At the same time, the captain of the California decided to halt their journey, as they appeared to be surrounded by icebergs. At this moment, the Titanic was unaware of the iceberg ahead, continuing its rapid advance towards the California. At 11:39 p.m., a lookout spotted a massive iceberg directly ahead and immediately rang the bell 3 times. The alarm was received below, and a call was made to the bridge. The officer on duty, the first officer, ordered hard aport under extreme stress. In the next minute, the crew in the lookout tower saw an iceberg of equal height to them approaching rapidly. They thought they had successfully avoided the iceberg at the critical moment and felt relieved, but it was 11:40. They believed they had avoided the iceberg, but 10 seconds later, they felt a slight vibration followed by the sound of the iceberg scraping against the ship's hull. Then, the enormous vessel swiftly left the iceberg behind. At that time, everyone generally believed the Titanic was unsinkable. However, had the Titanic actually collided head-on, it might not have sunk to the ocean floor. 33 years prior to the Titanic tragedy, the SS Arizona experienced a nearly identical ordeal. Despite its bow being nearly destroyed by an iceberg, the captain's decision to charge forward at full speed allowed the SS Arizona to avoid sinking and safely return to its port. Engineers had long considered the risk of such accidental collisions in ship design, equipping all ships, including the Titanic, with collision bulkheads. A direct hit from an iceberg would only breach 1 or 2 of these compartments. Remember the initial safety metric mentioned? Even with 4 compartments flooded, the vessel could still remain afloat. However, Titanic's maneuver to bypass the iceberg resulted in a significant fissure across the hull, spanning the length of 5 compartments. Thus, 20 minutes into Titanic's swift journey forward, the captain, the designer, and a group of senior managers convened for a discussion. The captain urgently ordered the ship to halt, but the designer was visibly panicked, stating, "5 compartments are breached, and water is flooding in at a rate of 400 tons per minute. And it has been for 20 minutes. Titanic has roughly 2 hours left before it's completely submerged." The experienced and composed captain quickly made his way to the telegraph room, stating calmly, "CQD at latitude 41.46 north, longitude 50.14 west." The 2 telegraph operators immediately ceased processing passengers' telegrams and began to send out distress signals with all their might. Time flew by, a minute, 2 minutes, but there was no response from any nearby ships. At that moment, telegraph operator J.G. Phillips realized that wasn't the International Telegraph Union recently introduced a new emergency code? Thus, he decided to give it a try. Titanic became the first ship in history to issue an SOS signal. Just 2 minutes later, responses from nearby ships began pouring in. The closest vessel, the Carpathia, was 107 kilometers away, requiring at least 3.5 hours to reach Titanic, which now had only 2 hours left. Upon receiving this news, the captain could no longer maintain his composure, understanding the gravity of the situation. However, at this critical moment, the telegraph operator suddenly remarked, "There might also be a California nearby, but they have not responded at all." "Keep sending," was the captain's last straw of hope. At this juncture, the captain ordered the ship to be abandoned. Unbeknownst to them at that moment, the California was already anchored 37 kilometers away. Its telegraph operator, angered, had turned off the machine and gone to sleep. It was only upon reactivating the telegraph the next morning that he discovered a flurry of CQD and SOS messages. In the chaos aboard the Titanic, as crew members frequently launched distress flares, the Californian's lookout actually noticed these signals. However, when he reported to the captain, the latter mistook the flares for low-flying fireworks, believing the Titanic was hosting a fireworks show. Subsequent scientific investigations suggest this misinterpretation might be related to a mirage caused by the icy waters and temperature changes, affecting the light refraction of the flares and making them appear weak and firework-like. Thus, the Californian missed a crucial opportunity to rescue everyone on board. The Titanic not only faced a series of coincidental events on the Californian, but also encountered a series of seemingly cursed coincidences. For instance, during the hearings that followed, a surviving lookout admitted that night they had no binoculars. Had binoculars been available, the lookout conceded they could have spotted the iceberg at least a minute earlier, enough time to save everyone. However, when the court delved into why binoculars were missing that night, it sparked public outrage. In fact, the captain had made last-minute changes to the positions of the first, second, and third officers the day before sailing. He appointed the Olympic's first officer as the Titanic's first officer. The Titanic's previous first officer was demoted to second, and the second to third. The original third officer, Blair, lost his position and was instructed to leave the ship. In his anger, Blair accidentally took a key that locked the binocular cabinet, intended for the lookouts. This key was later sold to a Chinese businessman for £90,000 and is now on display in Nanjing, China. Amidst the abandoned ship order, crew began organizing passengers into lifeboats. 2 officers reported back to the captain, but by then he was mentally collapsed and responded blankly, "Indeed, women and children first. Yes, proceed." However, this led to a misunderstanding. The officer on the port side interpreted it as only women and children could board the lifeboats, while the officer on the starboard side understood it as others could board after women and children. As a result, the first lifeboat launched on the starboard side. Lifeboat number 7 was occupied by only 28 people, despite having a capacity of 65 or even 70 if squeezed. Therefore, even though the Titanic was equipped with 16 lifeboats, theoretically capable of rescuing 990 passengers, only 633 were actually saved. The second unexpected situation regarding the lifeboats occurred on April 14th during the day. There was supposed to be a full crew lifeboat drill according to the original plan. However, for some unclear reason, the captain decided to temporarily cancel this activity 5 minutes before the drill was to start. By the night of April 14th, passengers and crew members without practical experience were in chaos on deck, desperately seeking a way to survive. The chairman of the White Star Line, J. Bruce Ismay, was related to the third coincidence. Before the Titanic set sail, he suggested to the ship's designers that the number of lifeboats should be reduced to make the decks appear more open, believing the Titanic to be unsinkable. He proposed the removal of 24 lifeboats that could have accommodated up to 1,560 individuals. Tragically, the death toll was 1,514. In reality, the Titanic's fourth funnel was decorative and did not emit smoke. Ismay, prioritizing the ship's aesthetic appearance, decided to add the fourth funnel, which resulted in the loss of space for 24 lifeboats. Amidst the chaotic escape scene, there were many touching stories that truly happened. For instance, the band that bravely performed until the end, and the elderly couple who lost their lives while embracing each other, were real characters. This elderly couple is considered the real-life inspiration for the characters Jack and Rose in the movie Titanic. If you are passionate about shopping, you are likely familiar with Macy's department store. Macy's was once the world's largest department store chain, and its founders were the elderly couple who died together in the movie, the Strauss couple. Their marriage had lasted for 40 years, during which they embarked on their entrepreneurial journey in the United States. He rose from an unknown small merchant to become one of the wealthiest men in America. To enjoy a peaceful retirement, they relocated to Europe for a vacation last winter. The Strausses had originally planned to return to the U.S. aboard the Olympic in the spring. However, an accident on the Olympic leading to a strike forced them to postpone their planned trip. White Star Line later rebooked their tickets on the Titanic. The total value of their tickets amounted to £442, approximately $140,000 today. As prominent passengers, they were accompanied by a maid and a male servant. As the iceberg incident unfolded, they initially planned to board lifeboat number 8. However, upon reaching the lifeboat, the elderly gentleman learned that only women and children were allowed to board, and he had to remain on the Titanic. Faced with this situation, the husband resolutely bade farewell to his wife. Unexpectedly, his wife decided not to board the lifeboat, stating, "We've been married for many years. Wherever you go, I go." At that time, lifeboat number 8 still had many unoccupied seats, and other passengers indicated they wouldn't mind if the elderly lady accompanied her husband. Despite this, the elderly gentleman firmly shook his head in refusal. Shortly after, the wife jumped back onto the deck, standing shoulder to shoulder with her husband. She even gave her fur coat to a nearby maid. Mrs. Strauss gave up their lifeboat spot to the maid, ensuring her survival. The last time people saw the elderly couple, they were standing on the deck, hand in hand, smiling. Although the husband's body was later recovered, the wife's body remains a mystery to this day. Their children erected a tombstone for them with the inscription, "Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it," a phrase from the Old Testament. However, from the historical records, we coldly observe that although lifeboat number 8 could originally accommodate 65 passengers, it only carried 28 passengers at the time. The ship's excessive speed, the closure of the telegraph, insufficient lifeboat preparation, and the locking of binoculars in a cupboard were merely coincidental factors leading to the tragedy. However, what directly triggered the sinking of the Titanic? In 2009, Dr. Hugh and his research team from Johns Hopkins University finally provided a credible answer. Surprisingly, this answer shockingly coincides with Robert Gardner's speculation 14 years earlier, revealing that the real culprit was, indeed, the rivets. Do you remember those 46 rivet samples retrieved from the water? The number 4 steel, which was supposed to be used, was actually made from number 3 steel, and more shockingly, a large amount of low-quality iron nails were mixed into the number 3 steel. Thus, Dr. Who holds the view that the fundamental cause of the Titanic's sinking lies in those rivets, and indeed, the ship's quality was compromised. However, unlike Robert Gardner's speculation, Dr. Who offered a more rational explanation. First, his team replicated these steel and iron rivets. Then, they used a hydraulic press to mimic the Titanic's steel plate structure and conducted multiple compression tests. Doctor Who then posed a question. Why were rivets switched from number 4 steel to number 3 steel? Test results showed that while the pressure-bearing capacity of numbers 4 and 3 steel was almost identical, number 3 steel was easier to install. At that time, to accelerate the production pace of the Titanic, using number 3 steel was completely in line with technical specifications. However, when Doctor Who decided to conduct freezing treatments on numbers 3 and 4 steel in a simulated low-temperature environment, the results were significantly different. Clearly, number 3 steel was more likely to fracture under lower temperature conditions. The fundamental cause of the Titanic disaster was the fracture of these rivets, leading to cracks at the steel plate junctions. Contrary to our expectations, it was actually the iceberg directly colliding with the ship's steel plates. Doctor Who explicitly stated, if the entire ship had been made with number 4 steel, the Titanic's sinking would not have been so rapid, allowing more time for the subsequent rescue operations. The second question concerns, why were there inferior iron rivets? Studies showed that the impurities in these iron rivets weren't just low quality, but were intentionally mixed with carbon powder. Previously, due to the limitations of hydraulic technology at the time, these hydraulic machines were available when rivets were fixed on large areas of steel plates. However, when these machines encountered the irregular parts of the ship's bow, they could not work properly and had to rely on manual installation. Therefore, whether using number 3 or 4 steel, their strength was too high, making it practically impossible for workers to manually install these two qualities of steel rivets, and they had to choose to install relatively softer iron rivets. However, the compression resistance of iron rivets was obviously not enough. What should be done? Therefore, based on past experiences, workers decided to mix carbon powder into these iron rivets. This method actually helped to improve the stability of the iron rivets. However, at that time, the technicians did not consider the core element of low temperature. Due to the addition of carbon powder, the iron rivets were more prone to fracture under lower temperatures. This phenomenon caused larger cracks in the ship's hull, thereby accelerating the sinking speed. In 2009, Dr. Tang, an ocean expert from the International Ice Patrol, proposed a new perspective. He argued that the second major culprit behind the Titanic's sinking was the unusual climatic conditions of 1912. In that specific year, the close proximity of the Moon and the Sun was the closest since 1400 years ago. This rare astronomical event increased the ocean's tidal gravitational force by 74% compared to normal. Considering the days before the Titanic's sinking, Earth was at the peak of solar gravitational pull. Thus, the Titanic actually encountered a once-in-a-millennium high tide. Normally, glaciers moving south from the Arctic might run aground on the vast shallow banks near Labrador. Based on the captain's personal experience, he adjusted the course southward twice, which theoretically was completely safe. However, he did not realize that, at that moment, Earth was experiencing a once-in-a-thousand-years high tide, allowing these massive icebergs to cross the broad shallows and drift directly southward. Dr. Tang further emphasized, although the high tide might help these icebergs cross the shallows, theoretically, these icebergs should not have been considered a safety hazard. This was because they were blocked by the Gulf Stream ahead. The average temperature range of the Gulf Stream is 15 to 18 degrees, meaning that icebergs would start to melt and gradually break into smaller pieces within about 10 days. In 1912, after experiencing a once-in-a-century warm winter, the Gulf Stream shifted southward unexpectedly, causing icebergs to drift onto the Titanic's southern route. Although the captain received 7 consecutive iceberg warnings and realized he was trapped among icebergs, why didn't he reduce speed? There are 2 main reasons. First, J. Bruce Ismay publicly stated at the subsequent hearings that he hoped to arrive in the United States as soon as possible to win the Blue Riband for the fastest Atlantic crossing. Another unbelievable point is that the navigation rules at the time explicitly required speeding up instead of slowing down and avoiding when encountering icebergs. Therefore, in that context, the captain's continued acceleration was not considered inappropriate. However, after the Titanic tragedy, people began to reevaluate this navigation rule. The true story behind the Titanic tragedy is a cumulative result of many factors, and the final hearing did not hold any of the parties involved accountable. Whether it was the surviving J. Bruce Ismay, the lookouts, or the telegraphers, none were held responsible. The story behind the Titanic serves as a historical elegy, vividly showcasing the tragic conflict between human confidence and the forces of nature. This ship, hailed as the Unsinkable, faced immense challenges on its maiden voyage, highlighting the conflict between technological arrogance and the powers of nature. On that starry, bitterly cold night, the Titanic sank into the deep sea, taking the lives of over 1,000 people. In this tragedy, we see the courage of the crew, families forced to part ways, and dreams that were never fulfilled. Their stories have become a footnote in time, reminding the world of the eternal lesson of reverence and humility towards nature.